Chapter 1. The Missing Number. Dave Ellis had always believed that seating charts revealed more about a family than any group photo ever could. At least, that was the conclusion he reached after staring at a spreadsheet for 47 minutes while Marcy Tucker leaned over his shoulder, armed with a pen, a mug of coffee, and an expression that suggested she was one misplaced chair away from declaring open war. "You've moved your aunt 3 times, Marcy said, tapping the table with the pen. "Are we sure she isn't just going to complain no matter where she sits?" Dave leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. "Oh, she will. That's not the point. The point is minimizing the radius of destruction." Marcy nodded slowly, as if accepting the logic of a man who had clearly thought far too much about emotional blast zones. "So we're placing her near people she doesn't know." "Exactly. That way, she'll spend more time introducing herself than criticizing everyone." Marcy smiled despite herself and made a note. "Strategic isolation. I like it." Dave turned his attention back to the spreadsheet, but his focus drifted almost immediately to a problem that refused to resolve itself with logic or distance. 2 names sat at opposite ends of the digital chart, Mom and Dad. Even labeled so simply, they carried enough weight to distort the whole system. "Okay," Marcy said, settling into the chair beside him. "Let's talk about the real issue." Dave didn't look up. "We've been talking about real issues." "No," she said, nudging his arm. "We've been avoiding this one." She pointed at the screen. "Your parents." Dave exhaled slowly. "Right? There wasn't anger there. No dramatic history of shouting matches or slammed doors. In fact, if anything, the lack of visible conflict made things worse. You couldn't solve what you couldn't define. "They should just sit apart," he said finally. "Different sides of the room, different tables, different hemispheres, if possible." Marcy laughed. "You don't think that's a little extreme? Have you ever seen tectonic plates collide?" Dave asked. "I'm trying to avoid continental drift." She leaned back and studied him, her expression softening. "You know, most people's parents don't require geological metaphors. Most people's parents aren't." He trailed off, searching for the right word and failing to find one that wasn't unfair. "They're complicated." Marcy reached over and squeezed his hand. "Hey, we'll figure it out." Dave nodded, but his attention was already drifting somewhere else, somewhere less immediately manageable than seating logistics. His father. It wasn't that Dave didn't think about him. He did, occasionally. In the background of his busy life, between work deadlines and weekend errands, his father existed as a constant assumption. Steady, reliable, unchanged. A fixed point. Which was why the sudden, simple question hit him like a dropped plate. "Do you have your dad's RSVP yet?" Marcy asked. Dave blinked. "His what?" "His RSVP. For the wedding." She tilted her head. "You did invite him, right?" "Of course I did," Dave said automatically. Marcy waited. Dave frowned and reached for his phone. "I mean, I would have. I just need to check the message." He scrolled and scrolled, then paused, then frowned harder. "Okay," he said slowly. "Maybe it was a call." "Aha." Dave switched apps, searching through his call history. It didn't take long for the confidence to drain out of his posture. "Ha, ha," Marcy echoed. "Ha," Dave repeated, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. "Dave, yeah. Why are you saying ha like that?" "Because," he said carefully, "I don't see any recent calls to my dad." Marcy folded her arms, her eyebrows rising. "Okay, so call him now." "Right?" Dave said quickly, relieved by the obvious solution. He tapped into his contacts, then stopped. Marcy watched his face change again, this time with something more unsettling than confusion. "Dave," she said more gently now. "What is it?" He swallowed. "I don't have his number." There was a beat of silence. Then Marcy blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't have his number," Dave repeated, hearing how ridiculous it sounded even as he said it. "You've had the same father your entire life," she said. "I know that. And at some point you must have called him." "I did. So where is his contact?" Dave looked at his phone as if answers might materialize out of sheer willpower. "It must not have transferred when I upgraded. Or I forgot to save it again. Or I just didn't notice." Marcy stared at him, not judgmentally, just trying to understand the logic of a world where this could happen. "Dave," she said slowly, "when was the last time you actually talked to your dad?" Dave opened his mouth, closed it, then frowned. "I mean, we talked after the divorce," he said. "And a few times after that. He said he was okay. He told me to focus on my career. And since then, I've sent a few texts." "From which device?" she asked carefully. Dave winced. "Right," Marcy said, sitting back. "Okay, that's not great." "No, it's not great," Dave agreed, running a hand through his hair. "But it's not like I ignored him. You thought your mom was keeping him updated," Marcy said. Dave blinked. "Yeah." He paused, then repeated it slower this time. "I thought my mom was keeping him updated." The sentence hung in the air for a moment before collapsing under its own weight. "That sounds insane when I say it out loud," Dave muttered. Marcy tilted her head. A little. A lot, he corrected. He stood up and started pacing, the pieces rearranging themselves in his mind in ways he didn't like. I just assumed they talked, he said. I mean, they're adults. They were married for decades. Why wouldn't they? Dave, Marcy said gently. I know, he interrupted, holding up a hand. Divorce, separate lives, boundaries. I get it. I just didn't get it. Marcy smiled slightly. Welcome to realizing your parents are people. Dave let out a short laugh. I don't like this realization. No one does, she said. It's deeply inconvenient. He stopped pacing and looked at her. I need to call my mom. That would be step one, yes. Dave grabbed his phone again and dialed, his heart beating a little faster than he cared to admit. When his mother answered, her voice was warm and familiar, grounding in a way that almost made him forget why he was calling. Hi, honey. Hey, Mom, he said, trying to sound normal. Quick question. Okay. Do you have Dad's phone number? There was a pause. Not a dramatic one. Not long enough to raise alarms for anyone who wasn't specifically listening for it. Dave was. No, his mom said. Dave frowned. No, I don't have his number, she repeated. Why would I? Dave blinked. Because you might need to call him? We don't talk, Dave, she said, as if explaining something obvious. The words landed harder than he expected. You don't talk, he echoed. No, she said. We haven't in years. Dave leaned against the wall, his earlier frustration with seating charts feeling laughably small now. Do you have his address? He asked. I think so, she said. It should be in the paperwork. Hold on. The line went quiet. Dave stared at the floor, his reflection faintly visible in the polished tile. For the first time, he couldn't quite reconcile the version of reality he'd been living in with the one that was quietly taking its place. After a moment, his mother returned and read off an address. Dave wrote it down, thanked her, and hung up. Then he typed it into his phone. It took exactly 3 seconds for the map to load, and exactly 1 glance for his stomach to drop. That, he said slowly, doesn't make any sense. Marcy leaned in. What? Dave turned the screen toward her. She studied it for a moment, then looked up at him. That's not where I expected an engineer to live, right? Dave said. They stood there in silence for a moment, the quiet stretching as reality continued to shift under their feet. Finally, Marcy slipped her hand into his. What are you thinking? She asked. Dave exhaled slowly. I'm thinking, he said, that maybe I've been assuming things for a long time. Marcy squeezed his hand. Yeah. And I'm thinking, he continued, glancing back at the address, that we should go see him. Marcy smiled. Good, she said, because I was going to suggest that. Dave nodded once, his decision settling into something solid. Saturday, he said. Saturday, Marcy agreed. And just like that, the seating chart didn't seem like the most complicated thing in his life anymore. Chapter 2. The apartment on Halstead. Saturday arrived with a kind of reluctant punctuality Dave didn't fully appreciate. He had always liked Saturdays. They carried the promise of productivity without the pressure of deadlines, the quiet illusion that anything left undone during the week could be fixed with a decent breakfast and enough coffee. Today, however, Saturday felt less like a reprieve and more like a scheduled confrontation, with reality, with assumptions, and possibly with himself. Marcy, on the other hand, treated the morning like any other mission. Eat something, she said, placing a piece of toast into his hand as he stood in the kitchen, staring vaguely into the middle distance. I'm not hungry. You're nervous, she corrected. There's a difference. Eat anyway. Dave obeyed, though mostly because it was easier than arguing. He chewed slowly, as if each bite might prepare him for what lay ahead. You think he'll be mad? He asked after a moment. Marcy leaned against the counter, watching him carefully. No, that was very confident. It's also a guess, she said. But based on what you've told me, your dad doesn't sound like someone who holds grudges. Dave nodded, though the knot in his stomach didn't loosen. Yeah, he's more of a shrug and move on kind of person. Then you'll be fine, she said gently. And if you're not, we'll deal with it. Dave offered a faint smile. We, obviously, Marcy said, grabbing her keys. You proposed. You're stuck with me. He laughed, and just like that, the edge of the morning dulled slightly. The drive took longer than it should have. Not because of traffic, but because Dave kept checking the navigation, as if hoping the address would change if he looked often enough. Didn't. The city gave way gradually, slipping from well-kept storefronts and polished sidewalks into something rougher around the edges. Paint faded. Fences leaned. The streets narrowed in a way that felt less intentional and more forgotten. Marcy didn't comment at first, but Dave could feel her noticing. Maybe it's one of those up-and-coming areas, he said, a little too quickly. She glanced at him. Maybe. They turned onto Halstead, and the word maybe officially retired from useful consideration. The buildings here weren't falling apart. Not exactly, but they carried a kind of tired permanence, as though they'd long ago stopped expecting improvement. Windows were intact but cloudy. The parking lot they pulled into had more patches than pavement. Dave turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. Well, he said finally, this is different. Marcy nodded. This is different. They climbed out of the car, the late morning air carrying the faint smell of something fried and something damp. Dave reached into the back seat and pulled out a box. Cinnamon rolls? Marcy asked. Peace offering, he said. Or at least, neutral territory. I like it, she said. Food diplomacy. They walked toward the building together, their steps unconsciously slowing as they approached the entrance. Dave checked the apartment number again, as though it might suddenly contradict itself. Didn't. Inside, the hallway was narrow but clean. Not polished, not modern, but deliberately maintained. The kind of place where effort quietly compensated for limited resources. That's something, Marcy murmured. Yeah, Dave agreed. It is. They found the door halfway down the hall. Dave raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. Marcy leaned in slightly. You waiting for divine intervention? Just a second, he said. He took a breath, squared his shoulders, and knocked. There was no immediate response. Dave shifted his weight, suddenly hyper-aware of the silence. Then, faintly, footsteps approached. The door opened. For a fraction of a second, the man standing there looked at Dave with polite uncertainty, the kind reserved for salespeople and wrong addresses. Then recognition hit, sudden and undeniable. Dave. The change was immediate. His father's face broke into a grin so wide and unguarded it erased years in an instant. Well, I'll be, he started, then laughed outright and pulled Dave into a hug that was both firm and unmistakably real. Dave froze for half a heartbeat before returning it. Hey, Dad, he said, his voice catching just slightly. His father leaned back, still holding his shoulders, studying him with open delight. Look at you, he said. You look happy. Dave smiled, some of the tension dissolving under that simple observation. I am. His father's eyes shifted to Marcy. And I'm guessing this young woman has something to do with that. Marcy laughed softly, stepping forward. Hi, I'm Marcy. Well, Marcy, his father said, shaking her hand warmly. I officially approve of you. Anyone responsible for that expression is clearly doing something right. Dave rolled his eyes. You've known her for 10 seconds. That's all I need, his father said easily. Then he stepped aside. Come on in. You didn't drive all this way to stand in the hallway. The apartment was small, just as Dave had imagined, but that was where the accuracy of his imagination ended. It wasn't bleak. It wasn't neglected. It wasn't even particularly sad. It was lived in. Books lined one wall in careful rows. A chair near the window held a neatly folded blanket. The kitchen, visible from the living area, was clean enough to suggest regular use, not just occasional obligation. This is nice, Marcy said, and she meant it. His father smiled. Thank you. It does the job. He gestured toward the couch. Sit. I'll grab some coffee. And oh, he pointed at the box Dave was still holding. You brought something. Cinnamon rolls, Dave said. I wasn't sure if you were exactly sure, his father interrupted with a grin. You remembered. Dave blinked. Remembered what? That cinnamon rolls solve at least 70% of life's problems, his father said, already heading toward the kitchen. The other 30% require more cinnamon rolls. Marcy laughed. I like him. Told you, Dave muttered, sitting down. From the kitchen came the sound of a kettle and the quiet rhythm of someone comfortable in their space. Dave leaned back, looking around again, noticing details he hadn't registered at first. The framed photos, sparse but carefully chosen. The tools tucked neatly on a shelf near the corner. Nothing here was accidental. His father returned a few minutes later with 3 mugs and a plate. So, he said, settling into a chair across from them. To what do I owe the surprise visit? Dave picked up his coffee, then hesitated. I realized I didn't have your number, he said. His father's eyebrows lifted slightly. That would make calling difficult. Yeah, Dave said, wincing. That's kind of what led to this whole realization. He explained, not rushing, not embellishing, just laying out the truth as he discovered it. The assumptions, the missed connections, the conversation with his mother. His father listened without interruption, occasionally nodding, his expression calm. When Dave finished, he sat back, waiting. So, he said quietly, aren't you mad? His father considered the question, then shrugged lightly. No, Dave blinked. No, he repeated. Why would I be? Because I basically disappeared, Dave said. You didn't disappear, his father replied. You moved forward. He took a sip of his coffee. That's what you're supposed to do. Dave shook his head. That feels like a very generous interpretation. It's an accurate one, his father said simply. There comes a point when everyone has to figure out who they are without someone else steering the wheel. He leaned back, examining Dave with quiet pride. My job was to get you to that point. From what I can see, I did. He paused, then grinned and made a show of dusting off his hands. Nailed it. Marcy laughed, and Dave couldn't help joining in. The ease of it, the absence of resentment was almost disorienting. But there was still one question left. Dave set his mug down. Okay, he said carefully. Then I need to ask you something. His father tilted his head. Go ahead. Why are you living here? For the first time, his father looked genuinely puzzled. Where else would I live? He asked. Dave gestured vaguely around the apartment. I don't know. Somewhere that matches you. Your job. Your life. My life? His father repeated, a flicker of amusement in his voice. Dave, this is my life. Dave frowned. But you're an engineer. His father nodded. I was. Still am, in a manner of speaking. In a manner of speaking? Dave echoed. His father smiled slightly, as if the answer were both simple and somehow not. I'm the groundskeeper now. The words landed quietly. Too quietly. Dave blinked. The what? Groundskeeper, his father repeated. It's honest work. Keeps me busy. Dave stared at him, his mind struggling to catch up. Why? He asked. His father hesitated just long enough to be noticeable, then spoke with the same steady tone. Because, he said, I've got a mortgage to pay on a house I don't live in, and alimony to handle on top of that. Marcy's expression tightened. Wait. Dave leaned forward, his pulse picking up again. What do you mean alimony on top of that? He asked. His father met his gaze calmly. I mean, he said, that I'm still paying it. Dave frowned. But Mom's remarried. His father held his eyes for a moment, then shook his head. No, he said. She isn't. Chapter 3. The wedding that wasn't. For a moment, Dave was certain he had misheard. It wasn't a dramatic misunderstanding, not the kind that came with echoes or confusion. It was simpler than that. Cleaner. Like a sentence that refused to rearrange itself into something acceptable. No, his father had said. She isn't. Dave stared at him, waiting for the inevitable clarification. The of course she is. I'm joking, or the you misunderstood something along the way. It didn't come. Marcy shifted slightly beside him, her expression thoughtful rather than shocked, as though she were already working through the implications. I don't understand, Dave said finally. I was at the wedding. His father let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if it carried any humor. Sure you were, he said. They had the ceremony. Dave leaned forward. Then how are you saying she's not remarried? His father met his gaze, steady and unblinking. Because they never filed anything. The room seemed to shrink around the statement, drawing tighter with each passing second. Dave blinked. What? They had the dresses, the vows, the cake, the dancing, his father said, ticking the items off with measured calm. The whole production. But there was no paperwork. That doesn't make any sense, Dave said, shaking his head. Why would anyone go through all of that and not actually, get married? That, his father said lightly, is an excellent question. Marcy leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Are you sure? His father gave her a small, understanding smile. Not offended, not defensive. I don't deal in guesses, he said. The divorce agreement was very clear. Alimony ends upon remarriage. There are procedures in place to confirm that sort of thing. Something cold settled into Dave's chest. So you checked, he said. I verified, his father replied. And she never... No, he said simply. Silence filled the space again, heavier now, less uncertain. Dave sat back slowly, his thoughts colliding in ways he couldn't neatly sort. Images replayed themselves in his mind. The wedding, the music, the way his mother had looked walking across the floor, smiling in a way that had seemed certain. He remembered sitting with his grandmother, laughing over slices of cake. Remembered toasting her happiness. Remembered watching her dance with the man who was, in every visible way, her husband. Except, apparently, not in the one way that counted. That's... Dave stopped because no version of the sentence felt right. That's not possible. His father raised an eyebrow. You were there, Dave. You tell me what happened. We watched them get married, Dave insisted. Everyone did. Did you watch anyone file the paperwork? His father asked mildly. Dave opened his mouth, closed it. No, he admitted. His father nodded once. Then what you saw was a ceremony. The distinction felt absurd, and yet, as it settled into place, it refused to be dismissed. Marcy exhaled softly. Why would they do that? Dave turned to her, grateful and frustrated all at once. That's exactly what I want to know. His father shifted slightly in his chair, setting his coffee down with deliberate care. Well, he said, if you'd like my unfiltered opinion. I would, Dave said immediately. His father hesitated for just a heartbeat, then gave a small, rueful smile. It's about money, he said. The word landed without drama, but its impact was immediate. Alimony, Marcy said quietly. His father nodded. Continuing a system that benefits from the current arrangement, while avoiding the condition that would end it. Dave frowned. That sounds like... He stopped, because he knew exactly what it sounded like, and saying it out loud would drag it firmly into reality where it couldn't be ignored. His father filled in the silence anyway. Unfair, he suggested. Dave exhaled sharply. That's one word for it. Another silence followed, heavier this time, not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much of it. Dave rubbed his face with both hands, then dropped them into his lap. Okay, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Okay, hold on. He pushed himself up and began pacing, the movement helping him process. This doesn't track, he muttered. Mom wouldn't. She's not. I mean, Marcy watched him carefully, but didn't interrupt. She said they grew apart, he continued. That it was mutual. That they both agreed it was time to move on. His father's expression didn't change. Those statements aren't necessarily in conflict with anything I've said. Dave stopped pacing and looked at him. No, he said slowly. But they're not exactly supporting it either. His father shrugged one shoulder. People tell stories in ways that make sense to them. That sounds like a polite way of saying they leave things out, Marcy said. It often is, his father agreed. Dave let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. This is ridiculous, he said. I built an entire understanding of things around something that isn't even real. You built it around what you experienced, his father corrected gently. There's a difference. Dave looked at him. That familiar steady presence somehow both comforting and disorienting. You're not even mad about it, he said again, unable to let it go. His father tilted his head. Mad about what? This? Dave said, gesturing vaguely. All of it. His father considered for a moment. I prefer clarity over anger, he said. Anger tends to complicate things unnecessarily. Dave let out a breath. Well, clarity is currently doing a number on my brain. His father smiled faintly. It will settle. Will it? Dave asked. Marcy answered instead. Yes, she said. He turned to her. Yes, she repeated more firmly. It will. You just need time to rearrange things. Dave studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, okay. He looked back at his father. So what does this mean? He asked. For you? His father said. For everything, Dave clarified. His father leaned back, folding his arms loosely. For me, it means I continue as I have been, he said. Work, pay my obligations, keep moving forward. And for Mom, Dave pressed. His father's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained even. That's her story to answer, not mine. Dave nodded once, accepting that boundary even if it frustrated him. And for me? He asked quietly. This time, his father didn't answer immediately. He studied Dave for a moment, really looked at him the way he had when Dave was younger and trying to solve something just beyond his reach. It means, his father said at last, that you get to decide what matters. Dave frowned. That's so vague. It's accurate, his father replied. You can't change what's already happened. You can't rewrite anyone else's choices. But you can decide what you do with the information you have. Dave absorbed that, turning it over in his mind. You always do this, he said. Do what? Answer questions like a fortune cookie with better grammar. His father grinned. And yet, somehow, you keep coming back for more. Marcy laughed softly, and the tension eased just enough to let Dave breathe again. He sat back down, picking up his coffee out of habit, even though it had cooled. I'm not going to turn this into sides, he said after a moment. That's not what this is. No one asked you to, his father said. But I'm also not going to ignore it, Dave added. His father nodded. That sounds reasonable. Dave glanced at Marcy. She met his gaze and gave a small, encouraging smile. Okay, he said more firmly now. Okay. For the first time since the conversation began, something like direction settled into place. Not a plan, he wasn't there yet, but the outline of one. Questions needed asking. Not accusations. Not confrontations. Just questions. And answers he wasn't going to assume anymore. Dave looked back at his father, then around the apartment again, taking it in fully this time. The simplicity, the care, the quiet dignity of it. You know, he said, this isn't what I pictured for you. His father chuckled. That's because you weren't supposed to picture it. You were supposed to live your own life. Dave smiled faintly. I guess I did that a little too well. There are worse problems to have, his father said. Dave stood up, feeling something settle inside him. Not resolution, not yet, but the beginning of it. We'll come back, he said. His father raised an eyebrow. Will you now? Yeah, Dave said. We will. Marcy stood beside him. Definitely. His father looked between them, then smiled. I'd like that, he said. And for the first time since the illusion had cracked, Dave felt something else take its place. Not certainty, but something steadier, something earned. Truth, however inconvenient, had a way of doing that. Chapter 4. Legal loopholes and cinnamon rolls. The drive home was quieter than the drive there. Not tense. Dave had expected tension, something sharp and uncomfortable, but instead it felt full. Like the air between them had been packed with too many thoughts to easily sort through all at once. Marcy broke the silence first. Okay, she said, adjusting her seatbelt slightly as she turned toward him. So we've got a ceremony with no license, a continuing alimony arrangement, and a man who somehow still manages to make cinnamon rolls sound like a philosophy. Dave let out a small laugh. That does sound like him. She studied him carefully. Where's your head at? Dave kept his eyes on the road, though his focus shifted somewhere inward. I keep replaying it, he admitted. The wedding, the music, the speeches, everyone treating it like it was real. It was real, Marcy said gently. He glanced at her. Was it? Yes, she said, calm but certain. Emotionally, socially, publicly, all of that counts. But legally, she paused. Legally might be where things get complicated. Dave frowned. That feels like splitting hairs. Sometimes, she said. Splitting hairs is where all the consequences live. He considered that, tapping his fingers lightly against the steering wheel. So what does that even mean? He asked. Legally. Marcy hesitated just long enough for him to notice. It means, she said slowly. We probably shouldn't guess. Dave gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. You're saying we should ask someone who actually knows what they're talking about. That would be my radical proposal, yes. He glanced at her again. You have someone in mind. My uncle, she said. He's a lawyer. Dave raised an eyebrow. Of course he is. What is that supposed to mean? It means your family continues to be annoyingly prepared for real life, Dave said. My family apparently specializes in surprise plot twists. Marcy smiled. Then let's borrow some preparedness. 2 days later, Dave found himself sitting at a polished wooden table that felt significantly more official than anything he'd dealt with in recent memory. Marcy's uncle, Robert, had the kind of presence that made people instinctively sit up straighter. Not intimidating exactly, but grounded. Like someone who had spent years reducing complicated situations into manageable pieces. Which was exactly what Dave needed. So, Robert said, folding his hands on the table. Start from the beginning. Dave did. He explained the wedding, the assumptions, the visit to his father, the apartment, the job, the alimony. Every piece of it laid out in the same straightforward way his father had modeled. Robert didn't interrupt. He didn't react much, either, beyond the occasional nod or slight shift in expression. When Dave finished, the room settled into a brief, thoughtful silence. All right, Robert said at last. Let's separate what we know from what we're assuming. Dave straightened slightly. Okay. What we know, Robert continued, is that there was a public ceremony resembling a marriage. Dave nodded. We also know that, according to your father, no marriage license was filed, right? And we know that alimony payments are continuing under a divorce decree that would terminate those payments if remarriage occurred. Dave hesitated, then nodded again. That's what he said. Robert leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Now, he said, what we need to consider is whether the absence of formal paperwork actually prevents the legal recognition of a marriage in practice. Dave blinked. That sounds like a yes or no question. Robert smiled faintly. It rarely is. Marcy leaned forward. Common law marriage, she said. Robert glanced at her with approval. Exactly. Dave looked between them. I feel like I missed a class. Marcy patted his arm. You were busy learning about seismic seating charts. Fair, Dave said. Robert nodded. A common law marriage, put simply, is a legal recognition of a relationship as a marriage, even without formal documentation, based on behavior and representation. Dave frowned. Representation? Yes, Robert said. How the couple presents themselves to the world. Living together, referring to each other as spouses, publicly acting as a married couple. Dave's mind immediately replayed everything he'd seen. The wedding, the introductions, the way people had spoken about them, not as partners, not as a couple, but as husband and wife. That sounds like them, he said slowly. Robert inclined his head. If those elements are established consistently, a court may recognize the relationship as a marriage in everything but paperwork. Dave frowned deeper. So you're saying they are married? I'm saying, Robert replied, careful and precise, that there is a credible argument to be made that they are operating as a married couple in a legally meaningful way. Marcy leaned back, absorbing that, which would affect the alimony. Yes, Robert said. If a court determines that a valid marriage, common law or otherwise, exists, then continuing to receive alimony intended for an unmarried individual would be problematic. Dave let out a low breath. Problematic how? Robert met his gaze directly. Potentially subject to termination, he said. And depending on the circumstances, there could be financial consequences. Dave's stomach tightened. You mean, repayment? In some cases, Robert said evenly. Yes. The room went quiet again. Dave looked down at his hands, then back up. You said, depending on the circumstances, he said. What circumstances? Robert tilted his head slightly. Intent. Dave swallowed. As in, whether it was deliberate. Yes. Marcy crossed her arms. It sounds deliberate. Robert didn't disagree, but he didn't fully agree either. It sounds, he said carefully, like something that would require closer examination. Dave leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. This is insane, he said. They had an entire wedding. Robert nodded. Which strengthens the case. Dave let out a hollow laugh. Of course it does. Marcy glanced at him. Hey, He looked at her. You don't have to solve everything today, she said. This isn't about fixing their lives all at once. Dave exhaled slowly. I know. I just... He paused, searching for the right words. I feel like I've been standing on something I thought was solid, and it turns out it's a knot. Robert's expression softened slightly. That happens more often than people like to admit, he said. Dave gave a small, humorless smile. Comforting. It's also an opportunity, Robert added. Dave raised an eyebrow. For what? For clarity, Robert said. For making decisions based on reality rather than assumption. Dave nodded slowly, the words landing in a familiar way. Clarity over anger. His father would have approved. So what do I do? Dave asked. Robert paused. That depends on your goal, he said. Dave frowned. My goal? Yes, Robert said. What outcome are you actually seeking? Dave opened his mouth, closed it, then sighed. I don't want to pick sides, he said. This isn't about turning my parents into opponents in some kind of legal battle. Robert inclined his head. Understandable. But I also don't want my dad. Dave stopped, correcting himself. I don't want anyone being taken advantage of. Marcy gave him a small nod of encouragement. That's a reasonable position, Robert said. But, Dave prompted. But, Robert continued, addressing a situation like this requires involvement, information, potentially action. Dave looked at him. Meaning what? Meaning, Robert said, that if this is something you choose to pursue, it stops being an abstract situation and becomes a real process. Dave let that sit for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. I'm not afraid of a process. Marcy smiled slightly. That's because you've never seen wedding catering contracts. Dave groaned. Don't remind me. The tension broke just enough for him to breathe again. Robert stood, signaling the end of the conversation. If you decide to move forward, he said, we can discuss next steps. For now, I'd suggest taking some time to think about what you want your role to be. Dave stood as well, extending his hand. Thank you. Robert shook it firmly. You're welcome. As they left, Marcy slipped her hand into Dave's. Well? She asked. Dave glanced at her, then ahead. Well, he said slowly. Apparently my life now includes phrases like common law marriage and financial consequences. Marcy smiled. You're adapting beautifully. He laughed softly. But beneath it, something steadier had taken hold. Not just confusion anymore. Not just shock. Something closer to intention. As they stepped out into the afternoon light, Dave realized something else, too. For the first time since all of this had started, he wasn't just reacting. He was deciding. Chapter 5. Rewriting the guest list. The seating chart had not changed. Objectively speaking, it was still the same spreadsheet. Same rows. Same carefully color-coded tables. Same neat alignment of names and relationships that had once seemed like a solvable puzzle. But now, as Dave stared at it from across the dining table, he couldn't shake the feeling that it had become something else entirely. It wasn't logistics anymore. It was a map. And for the first time, he wasn't entirely sure he understood the terrain. You're doing it again, Marcy said, sliding into the chair across from him with 2 mugs of coffee. Doing what? Looking at that spreadsheet like it personally offended you. Dave accepted the mug with a quiet thank you, then glanced back at the screen. I think it might have. Marcy followed his gaze. Still the same problem? No, Dave said slowly. Worse problem. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds promising. He leaned back, rubbing his jaw thoughtfully. Before, this was just about keeping people comfortable, avoiding awkward conversations, minimizing potential drama. And now it feels like every name on that list comes with context I didn't account for. Marcy tilted her head, studying him. Give me an example. Dave gestured toward the screen. My mom. That seems like a big example, she said. Exactly, Dave replied. She's not just mom anymore. She's someone making choices I don't fully understand. Someone who might have been bending the rules in ways that affect other people. Marcy leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. And your dad? Dave exhaled slowly. He's not just dad who's fine anymore. He's someone who's been adapting, quietly, without saying anything. She nodded. Okay, so the labels changed. Yeah, Dave said. The labels changed. Marcy took a sip of her coffee. That doesn't mean the people did. Dave blinked. What? They're still the same people, she said. You're just seeing more of them. Dave considered that, then gave a small, reluctant nod. That sounds annoyingly reasonable. I try, she said, smiling faintly. He turned back to the spreadsheet, but his posture shifted slightly, less defensive now, more thoughtful. So what do I do with it? He asked. With what? With the new information, Dave said. About them. About everything. Marcy didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood up and walked around the table, coming to rest beside him. She leaned over his shoulder, looking down at the list with him. You don't have to solve their story, she said quietly. This isn't their wedding. I know that, Dave said. Do you? She asked gently. He hesitated. That was answer enough. Marcy tapped lightly on the screen. This, she said, is about creating a space that reflects the life we're building, not managing the life they lived. Dave frowned. That sounds like it came from a book. Or from watching you spiral over a spreadsheet for 3 days, she said. He laughed despite himself. Okay, he admitted. Fair. She straightened slightly. So let's simplify. What do you want your day to feel like? Dave leaned back, considering. Calm, he said after a moment. Happy. Comfortable. Good, Marcy said. Now, what disrupts that? Dave glanced at the names again. Tension, he said. Unspoken things. People trying not to react to each other. Then that's your answer, she said simply. He turned to her. You're saying just keep them apart. I'm saying design the space so that everyone can exist without being forced into discomfort, Marcy clarified. That's not avoidance. That's planning. Dave nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Okay, that makes sense. He moved his mouse, adjusting a few placements. His mother's table shifted slightly farther from the center. His father's moved closer to a group Dave trusted. People who would engage him without asking questions he didn't want to answer. Marcy watched the changes with quiet approval. There, Dave said after a moment. That feels better. It looks better, she agreed. He saved the file, then leaned back again. For a moment, the room was quiet. Not tense this time, not heavy. Just quiet. Then Dave spoke again. I've been thinking about going back, he said. Marcy didn't need him to clarify. To your dad, she said. Yeah. She nodded once. Good. I didn't expect. He hesitated. I didn't expect it to feel that easy. Easy, Marcy echoed. Not simple, Dave corrected. But comfortable. Like picking up something that hadn't actually gone anywhere. Marcy smiled softly. That sounds like a good thing. It is, he said. I think it is. He looked down at his hands, then back up. I want to make sure it doesn't just stop there, he added. I don't want this to be a one-time realization where I go, wow, that's surprising, and then go back to assuming everything again. Marcy crossed her arms lightly, leaning against the edge of the table. So don't. Dave huffed a short laugh. Again with the simple answers. They're not always easy, she said. He nodded. No, they're not. Another pause settled between them, but this one felt intentional. So what's the plan? Marcy asked. Dave thought about it for a moment. Dinner, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Dinner. Yeah, he said, warming to the idea. Not here. Not there. Neutral ground. Marcy smiled. With cinnamon rolls? Dave grinned. Probably. I like it, she said. He stood, stretching slightly, the weight that had been sitting on his shoulders easing just enough to notice. And, he added, I think I'm going to call him. Before that. Marcy tilted her head. You have his number now? Dave pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up. Saved, backed up, and written down in 2 separate locations, he said. She laughed. Growth. Rapid growth, he corrected. He hesitated for just a moment before dialing. The phone rang once, twice. Then, hello. Dave smiled before he even spoke. Hey, Dad, he said. There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a warmth that felt instantly familiar. Dave, his father said. This is becoming a habit. I'm working on it, Dave replied. I approve, his father said. Dave leaned against the counter, glancing over at Marcy, who gave him an encouraging nod. I was thinking, Dave said. If you're free this week, maybe we could grab dinner. There was a slight pause. That sounds good, his father said. Very good, actually. Great, Dave said, relief threading through his tone. I'll text you the details. Looking forward to it, his father replied. They said their goodbyes and Dave ended the call. For a moment he just stood there, looking at the phone in his hand. Well? Marcy asked. Dave looked up at her, a quiet smile settling into place. Well, he said. I think I just rewrote more than the guest list. Marcy stepped closer, slipping her arms around his waist. Good, she said softly. Because we're building something new. Dave wrapped his arms around her, pulling her in. Yeah, he said. We are. Across the room, the seating chart sat quietly on the table, unchanged in appearance, but entirely different in meaning. And for the first time, Dave didn't see it as a problem to solve. He saw it as a choice, one he was finally ready to make. Chapter 6. Conversations that matter. Dave didn't plan the conversation with his mother. He thought about planning it briefly, outlining key points, anticipating responses, drafting neutral phrasing that wouldn't sound accusatory. That seemed like the responsible approach, the kind of careful preparation that might keep everything calm and contained. But every version of the plan felt artificial. So, in the end, he didn't plan anything at all. Instead, he drove over on a Wednesday evening with nothing more structured than a quiet determination not to let assumptions fill in the blanks again. Marcy offered to come, but Dave shook his head. I think this one's on me, he said. She didn't argue. Okay, she replied. resting her hand briefly against his chest. Just remember, you're asking questions, not declaring war. Dave smiled faintly. That's the goal. Good, she said. Because you're terrible at war. He laughed. Encouraging. I specialize in accuracy, she said, kissing his cheek before stepping back. Now, standing outside his mother's front door, Dave realized accuracy came with its own kind of pressure. He knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. Dave, his mother said brightly, genuine surprise warming her expression. This is a nice surprise. Hey, Mom, he said, stepping inside when she moved aside. The house looked exactly the same. It wasn't a dramatic observation, but it struck him anyway. Everything was in its place. The furniture, the photos, the familiar arrangement of a life he had always considered stable. Only now he understood stability didn't necessarily mean simplicity. What brings you by? She asked, heading toward the kitchen. I just made tea. Do you want some? Sure, Dave said. He followed her in, watching as she moved easily through the space, preparing a second cup with practiced efficiency. How's the wedding planning going? She asked over her shoulder. It's going, he said. That sounds like it's going exactly as expected, she replied dryly, handing him the cup. He smiled. Pretty much. She leaned against the counter, studying him. You're not here to talk about seating charts, she said. Dave met her gaze. No, he said. She nodded slightly, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. Okay, she said calmly. Then let's talk about what you are here for. Dave appreciated that. No evasion. No deflection. He took a breath. I saw Dad, he said. His mother didn't flinch. But something in her posture shifted, subtle, but unmistakable. I wondered when that might happen, she said. Dave tilted his head. You did. You were asking questions, she replied. About contact information. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. He nodded. Yeah, he said. That makes sense. A brief silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but deliberate. Like both of them were deciding where to place their next words. Well, she prompted gently. Dave exhaled. He's okay, he said. Not the way I expected, but okay. His mother's expression softened, just slightly. I'm glad, she said. Dave studied her. You haven't talked to him in years, he said. No, she replied. We haven't. Why? Dave asked. His mother didn't respond immediately. She looked down at her tea, then back up. Because, she said carefully, there wasn't anything left to say that wouldn't reopen things better left closed. Dave nodded slowly. That sounds reasonable, he said. From a certain angle. She smiled faintly. Most things do. He took a sip of his tea, letting the warmth steady him. There's something else, he said. I assumed there might be, she replied. Dave didn't dance around it. He told me you're still receiving alimony, he said. Her expression didn't change. But this time, the stillness felt more intentional. Yes, she said. And he said, Dave continued, that it's because you didn't remarry. Another pause. Then, that's correct, she said. Dave set his mug down carefully. But you did remarry, he said. I was there. His mother exhaled slowly, as if she had been expecting this exact sequence of words. We had a ceremony, she said. That's not what I asked, Dave replied. She met his eyes directly. No, she said. It isn't. The honesty of it caught him off guard. Not because it was unexpected, but because it removed any easy path away from the truth. So why? He asked. His mother leaned back slightly, folding her arms. Not defensive, exactly, but grounded. Because I learned from my first marriage, she said. Dave frowned. What does that mean? It means, she continued, that legal ties can be restrictive in ways people don't always anticipate. That sounds. Dave hesitated, carefully worded. It's accurate, she said. Dave studied her, trying to reconcile the calm explanation with what he now knew. You had a full wedding, he said. Public ceremony, reception, everything. Yes. You live together. You present yourselves as a married couple. Yes. But you didn't file the paperwork. No. And that allows you to continue receiving alimony. His mother didn't look away. Yes. The simplicity of her answers unsettled him more than any defensive argument could have. Do you think that's fair? Dave asked. There it was. The question he hadn't planned but couldn't avoid. His mother's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough to show that this, at least, mattered. I think, she said slowly, that fairness is a perspective. Dave let out a quiet breath. That's a very careful way of not answering. She gave a small, rueful smile. It's a way of acknowledging that situations are rarely as clear as they seem from the outside. Dave nodded once. I'm not on the outside, he said. Her gaze softened. No, she agreed. You're not. Another silence followed, heavier this time, not confrontational but honest. Dave straightened slightly. I'm not here to pick sides, he said. I'm not interested in turning this into a fight between you and Dad. I wouldn't ask you to, she said. But I am here because this affects more than just you, he continued. Her expression tightened slightly. How so? She asked. Dave held her gaze. Because he's still paying, he said. He changed his life around that. His mother's jaw shifted, just enough to signal tension beneath her composure. He made his choices, she said. And you made yours, Dave replied. They sat in that space for a moment, neither raising their voice, neither backing away, just holding the truth between them. I'm not here to judge you, Dave said after a moment. His mother looked at him carefully. But you are, she said. Dave considered that. Maybe a little, he admitted. She nodded, accepting it. That's fair, she said quietly. He exhaled, some of the pressure easing. What I'm really here to do, he continued, is understand. His mother studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed, soft, almost weary. I didn't want to be in a position again where my stability depended on someone else's decisions, she said. Dave listened. So I made sure it didn't, she added. At his expense, Dave said. Her eyes flickered. Yes, she said. At his expense. The admission hung in the air, stark and unvarnished. Dave nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Not agreement. Not approval. Just acknowledgement. I needed to hear that, he added. His mother's shoulders relaxed slightly. I figured you might, she said. Dave picked up his tea again, then set it back down without drinking. I don't know what I'm going to do with this yet, he said. She nodded. You don't have to decide right now. He looked at her, surprised. You're okay with that? I raised you to think for yourself, she said. It would be strange to stop now. Dave smiled faintly. Yeah, he said. That would be weird. He stood, sensing the conversation had reached its natural end. Not resolved, but complete for now. I'll call you later, he said. I'd like that, she replied. He hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged her. She returned it without hesitation. When they pulled apart, nothing had been fixed, but something important had shifted. On the drive home, Dave didn't feel clearer. Not exactly, but he felt grounded. The truth he was learning didn't always simplify things. Sometimes it just made them real. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Chapter 7. The man without training wheels. The restaurant Dave chose was quiet in the right ways. Not empty, not echoing, but calm. Conversations stayed close to their tables. Lighting softened edges instead of highlighting them, and the pace of everything felt unhurried. It was the kind of place that made space for real conversations without announcing that fact. Marcy noticed immediately. Good choice, she said as the host led them to a booth. Dave nodded. I figured somewhere neutral would help. Neutral is good, she agreed. Neutral allows for honesty without defensiveness. He smiled slightly. You sound like you're giving a seminar. Years of observing human behavior, she said. Also reality TV. That checks out. They slid into their seats, and Dave glanced toward the entrance just as the door opened. His father stepped in, pausing for a moment to take in the room before spotting them. The recognition was immediate, followed by that same easy smile Dave had come to realize wasn't a performance. It was default. There you are, his father said as he approached. For a second, I thought I'd have to interrogate the host. Dave stood, reaching out to shake his hand before pulling him into a brief hug. Hey, Dad. Hey yourself, his father replied, settling into the booth across from them. He glanced at Marcy. And you again. I believe that confirms my earlier assessment. You're sticking around. Marcy laughed. That's the current plan. Excellent, he said. Consistency is underrated. Menus were opened, small talk exchanged, and for a little while the evening moved easily. Orders placed, drinks delivered, familiar ground reestablished. But beneath it all, Dave felt something waiting. Not pressing, not demanding. Just present. When the server left, and the table settled into a quieter rhythm, Dave leaned forward slightly. I talked to Mom, he said. His father's expression didn't change much, but his attention sharpened. I imagined you might, he said. Yeah, Dave replied. It seemed like the next step. His father nodded once. And, Dave exhaled slowly. She confirmed it, he said. Everything. There was no visible reaction, no surprise, no anger, no satisfaction. Just acknowledgement. All right, his father said. Dave watched him carefully. That's it, he asked. His father tilted his head. What were you expecting? I don't know, Dave admitted. Something. His father considered that, then gave a small shrug. I've already adjusted to that reality, he said. You're just catching up. Dave leaned back, letting that sink in. Doesn't it bother you? He asked. His father smiled faintly. Of course it bothers me. Dave blinked. You don't show it. That doesn't mean it's not there, his father replied. It just means I've decided what to do with it. And what's that? Dave asked. Not let it consume me, he said simply. The answer landed with quiet weight. Marcy watched the exchange, her gaze moving between them, absorbing the dynamic with quiet interest. Dave leaned forward again, resting his forearms on the table. I talked to a lawyer, he said. This time, his father's eyebrows lifted slightly. That sounds serious, he said. It wasn't aggressive, Dave clarified quickly. More like informational. Information is useful, his father said. What did you learn? Dave hesitated for a moment, organizing his thoughts. About common law marriage, he said. About how a relationship can be recognized legally even without paperwork. His father's expression shifted just slightly. Not surprised, but more focused now. Go on, he said. They present themselves as married, Dave continued. They live together, act like a married couple, had a public ceremony. All of that can matter. His father nodded slowly. I'm aware, he said. Dave paused. You are. His father gave a small smile. I didn't stop paying attention when I changed job titles. Dave let out a breath that was half a laugh. Right? Of course you didn't. Marcy leaned in slightly. So you've considered options? His father met her gaze, appreciating the careful phrasing. I've considered many things, he said. Pursuing them is a different question. Why? Dave asked. You could challenge it. You could change the dynamic, his father offered. Yes, Dave said. His father leaned back, folding his hands loosely. Because every action has a cost, he said. Not just financially, emotionally, time, energy. Dave frowned. And you're okay just accepting it. I'm okay choosing where I invest myself, his father corrected. Dave opened his mouth, then paused. That sounds like something you've thought about a lot, he said. His father chuckled softly. You don't end up somewhere like my apartment without thinking about what matters. The food arrived, briefly redirecting the conversation. Plates were set down. Thanks exchanged. The normal rhythm of a shared meal grounding everything again. For a few minutes, they ate. Then Dave set his fork down. I don't think I can just leave it, he said. His father looked up. Leave what? He asked, though the answer was clear. The situation, Dave replied. The way it is. His father studied him, not critically, not skeptically, just thoughtfully. And why is that? He asked. Dave didn't answer immediately, because the easy answer wasn't enough. It's not just about the money, he said finally. It's about fairness, about what's right. His father nodded slowly. That's a good instinct, he said. But, Dave pressed. There's always a but, his father said. Fairness isn't always clean. Pursuing it can create new problems while solving old ones. Dave leaned forward again. So what are you saying? I'm saying you need to be very clear about your reasons, his father replied. And your expectations. Dave frowned. My expectations? Yes, his father said. What do you think happens if you pursue this? Dave opened his mouth, then stopped, because the truth was he hadn't thought that far ahead. I don't know, he admitted. That's an important answer, his father said. Dave rubbed the back of his neck. I just know I can't ignore it, he said. His father nodded. Then don't. Dave blinked. That's it. No, his father said. That's the beginning. He leaned forward slightly now, matching Dave's posture. This isn't about me, he said. And it's not really about your mother either. Dave tilted his head. Then what is it about? His father held his gaze. It's about you deciding the kind of man you want to be, he said. The words settled, heavier than anything else said that evening. Marcy didn't move, didn't interrupt. Dave sat there, absorbing it. I thought I already knew that, he said quietly. His father smiled faintly. So did I at your age. Dave huffed a soft laugh. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be, his father said. It's meant to be honest. Dave looked down at the table, then back up. How did you decide? He asked. His father leaned back, considering. A lot of trial and error, he said. A lot of choices that felt right at the time and needed adjusting later. That sounds messy, Dave said. It is, his father agreed. But it's also necessary. That's how you learn where your boundaries actually are. Dave nodded slowly. And your boundary here? He asked. His father shrugged lightly. I won't compromise who I am chasing something that might not change enough to matter, he said. Dave frowned. You think it might not change anything? I think, his father said carefully, that outcomes are never guaranteed, but consequences are. Dave let that sit for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay. He picked up his glass, taking a slow drink. So I need to be clear about what I'm doing and why, he said. Yes, his father said. And accept whatever comes with it. That would be wise. Dave glanced at Marcy. She met his gaze, calm and steady. You're not doing this alone, she said. His father smiled. She's right, you know. That helps. Dave let out a breath, some of the tension easing. Yeah, he said. It really does. They finished dinner with lighter conversation. Stories, small jokes, familiar rhythms starting to take shape. But the core of the evening stayed with him. When they stepped outside, the night air was cool and steady. Dave paused on the sidewalk, looking at his father. Hey, he said. His father turned. Hey, everything you said, Dave began, then stopped, searching for the right words. About figuring out who you are without training wheels. His father smiled. Yeah. Dave nodded. I think I'm starting to get it. His father's smile widened just slightly. Good, he said. That means you're right on schedule. Dave laughed. Feels late, he admitted. His father shook his head. It never is. They said their goodbyes, not rushed, not heavy. Just understood. As Dave walked back to the car with Marcy, something had shifted again. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Enough to know that whatever came next wouldn't be something he reacted to. It would be something he chose. And for the first time, that choice felt entirely his own. Chapter 8. A new arrangement. The final version of the seating chart didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a moment of clarity, or a sudden burst of inspiration where everything snapped neatly into place. It was slower than that, more deliberate, built in quiet revisions and thoughtful pauses. Dave stood in the doorway of the reception hall 2 days before the wedding, studying the room as tables were arranged and linens smoothed into place. What do you think? Marcy asked, stepping up beside him. Dave took a breath, letting his eyes move from one table to another, not just seeing positions now, but understanding them. It works, he said. Marcy tilted her head. Just works? Dave smiled slightly. No, he corrected. It's right. That mattered more. She slipped her hand into his. Walk me through it. Dave nodded, stepping forward. Mom's here, he said, gesturing toward a table set slightly off-center. Close enough to everything, but not central. And your dad? She asked. Dave pointed to a table on the opposite side, positioned near friends he trusted, the kind of people who didn't pry, who knew how to make someone feel included without questioning why they needed it. There, he said. Marcy followed his gaze. That's good, she said. Dave exhaled slowly, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling in. It's not about distance, he said. It's about space. Marcy smiled. That's a very evolved distinction. I had help, he said. She squeezed his hand. You did. The legal conversation had moved forward. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but steadily. Marcy's uncle had guided him through the first steps, explaining processes and possibilities without pushing him toward any particular decision. Dave had listened, asked questions, and, most importantly, taken his time. In the end, he made a choice that felt consistent with everything he'd learned. He didn't file anything himself. Not yet. Instead, he had one more conversation with his mother. Not confrontational, not accusatory, just clear. He told her what he knew. He told her what the law suggested. And he told her simply that he couldn't ignore it anymore. He hadn't expected a dramatic reaction. He didn't get one. His mother listened, her expression thoughtful, the same quiet composure she'd maintained before. I didn't think you would pursue this, she said. I'm not pursuing anything yet, Dave replied. I'm giving you the information. She studied him. And then? She asked. Dave held her gaze. And then you decide what you want to do with it, he said. Her lips pressed together slightly, not in anger, but in consideration. You've changed, she said. Dave smiled faintly. I think I stopped assuming. She nodded slowly. That will do that, she said. The conversation ended there. No resolution. But like everything else, something had shifted. The wedding day arrived without hesitation. Sunlight filtered through the venue's wide windows, soft and steady. Guests gathered in small groups, conversations weaving together into a low, warm hum of anticipation. Dave stood near the entrance, adjusting his jacket for the third time. You're going to wear that thing out, Marcy said from behind him. He turned, immediately losing track of whatever adjustment he'd been considering. She looked exactly like she should. Not perfect in some distant, unreachable way, but perfectly herself. Bright, steady, smiling with a warmth that grounded him instantly. Hi, he said, which was notably inadequate. Marcy laughed. Hi. He shook his head slightly. I had something better planned. Of course you did, she said. You're a planner. Not today, he replied. Good, she said, stepping closer. Today you just show up. He nodded. I can do that. The ceremony itself passed in a blur, not because Dave wasn't present, but because everything about it felt immediate and real in a way that didn't allow for overthinking. He saw Marcy walking toward him, and everything else fell into the background. He heard the vows, not recited from memory, but chosen with care. He felt his own words settle into place, not perfectly polished, but honest. And when it was done, when the moment shifted into applause and laughter and movement, he realized something. There were no assumptions left, only choices. The reception unfolded exactly as he had hoped. Not flawless, but smooth, comfortable, real. Dave moved through the room with Marcy at his side, greeting guests, sharing conversations, watching as different parts of his life overlapped in ways that felt intentional. At one point, he paused near his father's table. His dad looked up, a smile already forming. Well, he said, you pulled it off. Dave laughed. So far. His father's eyes flicked briefly across the room, then back. I noticed the arrangement, he said. Dave followed the glance, understanding immediately. Too far. he asked. His father shook his head. Just right. Dave nodded, something quiet settling inside him again. I thought so, he said. His father leaned back, studying him. You've done something interesting here, he said. Oh, Dave replied. You didn't avoid the situation, his father said. But you didn't force it either. Dave smiled faintly. I learned from someone. His father grinned. Smart man. Later, Dave found his mother near the edge of the dance floor. She turned as he approached, her expression softening. You look happy, she said. I am, he replied. She nodded, her gaze moving briefly across the room before returning to him. You've handled things thoughtfully, she said. Dave tilted his head. I tried. She hesitated for just a moment. I've been thinking, she said. Dave waited. About what you said, she continued. About everything. He nodded slowly. Okay. She exhaled quietly. There are some things I need to reconsider, she said. Dave didn't press, didn't ask for details. He just nodded again. That's all I wanted, he said. His mother studied him, then smiled, small but genuine. You're a good man, Dave, she said. He chuckled softly. Work in progress. Aren't we all? She replied. As the evening settled into music and laughter, Dave found himself back near the center of the room. Marcy joined him, slipping easily into his side. Well? She asked. Dave looked around, the tables, the people, the soft movement of a day that had come together not by accident, but by intention. Well, he said slowly, I think we got the arrangements right. Marcy followed his gaze, then looked back at him. Not just the seating, she said. Dave smiled. No, he agreed. Not just the seating. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. You ready for the rest of it? She asked. Dave considered that not just the moment but everything beyond it. The conversations still to come. The choices still waiting. The life they were building together, step by step, without assumptions to lean on. Yeah, he said. And this time he meant it completely. I am. As the music swelled and the night carried forward, Dave didn't think about what he had lost, or even what he had discovered. He thought about what he had chosen, and for the first time in a long time that felt like enough.